Let's dig into the big tech moves this year. Our next guest says if those mega cap stocks keep rising without support from the average stocks, it would create a durability issue similar to the tech bubble. For technical analysis, let's bring in Ted Sohn, technical strategist at Strategas Research Partners, a Baird company. Great to have you with us.
Thanks,
We've been hearing
here
that for a long time about this durability issue that's too concentrated, and yet the march has gone on. And yesterday we saw glimmers of hope of some broadening
for the rest of the market. The Mag 7 as an index is 30% above its 200 moving average. That's pretty aggressive. It's not extreme like 2021 was, but it can create a summer speed bump, especially with the election cycle starting to kick out. You can get corrections during election years. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw some profit taking, but ultimately the key to this market is the equal weight S&P 500, because when you start to get these big weights, which are so influential now in the S&P 500, without the bench, as I like to call it, you're not going to be able to sustain that. And that's when real issues come through. And so I liked what yesterday had, where you had the large cap names pause, but really good internal strength.
We had, I think, 400 of the S&P 500 stocks actually trade higher today, which is a real positive sign. Yeah. When you take a look at some of the leadership when it comes to the AI trade, it has been semiconductors. And I think what was really notable in the month of June is we saw some really interesting moves, particularly among NVIDIA and Broadcom. We saw outside reversals June 20th or so that week. And they haven't really regained. They haven't gone up to back to highs at all set on those days. Should we be more concerned given the sort of the speed bumps exhibited by some of the components?
Yeah, I think the expectations are so high. We have earnings coming up that when you start to see outside reversals like that on very high volume too, think about this.
High volume, yeah.
The 2x leveraged NVIDIA ETF is one of the most traded ETFs now. That is very uncommon, right? Usually it's your SPYs, your IWMs, right? So it's really odd to see this single stock ETF up there. So I think that you're setting yourself up for a correction. And if I was a portfolio manager, if I'm an investor, I have 10 stocks that are 40% of the S&P 500, 10 stocks that are 60% of large cap growth indices. So I want to look away. I want to look at healthcare. I want to look at financials, which as big tech has paused, those are the names that are actually starting to break out here too. So there's a lot of opportunity away from mega cap growth.
Naseema Modi. All right, so NVIDIA gets some price target hikes. Not much new on that end, obviously, but it's enough to get the stock rebounding.
It is, Scott. The stock is moving here right around $130 a share, following two more price target raises, this time from Benchmark and Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is pointing to second half tailwinds, including China's purchase of NVIDIA's older chips, the H100. Benchmark team's channel checks suggest demand is still outstripping supply despite new players. Speaking of new players in competition, SoftBank purchasing AI startup Graphcore, billed as a competitor to NVIDIA. However, the Financial Times reporting that scale has been an issue for this startup, and that's really been the challenge for any company really trying to rival NVIDIA right now. Speaking of those price target raises, we've seen 10 so far in the month of July, and next week we will get a good read on the broader semiconductor space. Two of NVIDIA suppliers, ASML, that specializes in lithography machines, and full earnings from chipmaker Taiwan Semi. Those two names out next week. So big week ahead, Scott.
Good. Finally, Ben, what about the AI winners up to this point? And I'm thinking of NVIDIA first and foremost, but then also the likes of Supermicro and Dell. How much of an influence are they going to have on the overall market, you think?
Well, I think that they're obviously, NVIDIA is the most important stock potentially in the market, as we know. And I think that they continue to lead. They had a phenomenal performance in the first half. So there is, and they did this last year too, by the way. They were only up 17%. I know, pretty good. Only up 17% the second half last year. Wouldn't be shocked if they had a more normal performance in the back half and gave some room to others. I think that Dell has more room to go. They're going to play an important role in enterprise. Supermicro we don't cover, but obviously they've got a strong position. We really like actually Broadcom here. Think that they're a really good play as well on the cloud CapEx, and we're looking for them to continue to execute quite well. And their play in infrastructure software is a little safer than application software at this point. So NVIDIA is going to be important, but there may be some room for others to pick up here.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, VMware looking pretty good for Broadcom in the last report as well.
Alright, so the action we saw in NVIDIA and the rest of megacap tech yesterday was very much welcome news. The recent rally in the market has had me slightly unsettled recently as we have repeatedly hit new all-time highs on relatively low volume. After we got a cooler CPI print yesterday, many market participants appear to have trimmed some profits from megacap tech and moved some of that capital into small and mid-cap stocks. This is very healthy for the market. We have been hearing so much this year about heavy concentration in the Mag 7 and especially so in NVIDIA, so it's encouraging that we may be starting to see some rotation into the rest of the market. As I said in yesterday's video, the one thing I am focusing on the most right now when it comes to NVIDIA is Taiwan Semiconductor's earnings report that is scheduled for next Thursday, July 18th. Remember, NVIDIA designs chips, and then they rely on other companies, mainly TSMC, to actually manufacture those chips. Additionally, Taiwan Semiconductor is by far the most important foundry that manufactures advanced chips not only for NVIDIA but for many other companies too. So this earnings report on July 18th is very important for NVIDIA and the entire industry. Also, something to be aware of is that TSMC's last earnings report included earnings from January through March, which is very straightforward. However, NVIDIA's last earnings report covered earnings through April 28th of this year. Now TSMC's earnings report on July 18th will give us results for the months of April, May, and June. NVIDIA's next earnings report in August should give us their earnings for the months of May, June, and most of July. So notice that there is some overlap here, and so TSMC's earnings on July 18th should really give us a sneak peek as to what we could expect from NVIDIA and the industry as a whole. What I'm looking forward to the most is TSMC's forward-looking guidance. As I've mentioned before, my main long-term concern with NVIDIA is that we may eventually get a quarter when forward-looking guidance softens. If this were to happen, then market participants would perceive a less aggressive expansion moving forward, and they would apply a much tighter multiple to NVIDIA stock. Let me quickly give an example of rapid multiple expansion and then subsequent compression. Zoom stock. Zoom soared in the early days of the pandemic as lockdowns ensued and people started working remotely. And Zoom stock began trading at many multiples of future earnings. Then as the pandemic subsided and the economy reopened, Zoom stock experienced multiple compression and dropped roughly 90% in price. And keep in mind, the underlying business was doing well and continued growing during this time, even as the stock fell in price. Why did this happen? Because the rate of growth slowed and market participants perceived a less aggressive expansion of the company moving forward, and so they applied a much tighter multiple to the company's stock. Now, please do not misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that NVIDIA is going to drop 90% or that NVIDIA is the next Cisco. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is that it's important to be aware that NVIDIA is now trading at many multiples of future earnings, and if we see forward-looking guidance start to soften, then I would genuinely be concerned about what happens next in the stock. So with all that said, I'm especially interested to see TSMC's forward-looking guidance next Thursday. I would not be surprised if we have some volatility in NVIDIA stock leading up to TSMC's earnings, and then potentially after the earnings report depending on what the results are. With that said, I'm curious to know your thoughts on NVIDIA in the comments below, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.